welcome back to the #1 podcast. Yes, you heard it here first. Listen, guys, I gotta put things out into the universe, okay? I gotta put a little spice, a little razzle dazzle on all things and put good vibes, get good vibes, okay? But yes, you heard it here first. It is the #1 podcast in all things social justice and equities, disparities, all of the things in the education space. I am your host, Monique Power, and you are listening to Blackademically Speaking. This is the podcast where we openly yet boldly discuss issues of anti-Black racism in education. And if you guys recall, in that last episode, I left you guys with a little bit of homework, right? I told you that I wanted to hear from you in my DMs, comments, wherever you were listening to this episode. I wanted to hear from you. I wanted to hear your thoughts. I wanted to hear where you thought we should go first with this conversation. And girl, let me tell you, I did not need any input. This topic of conversation I think is super fitting because after I released that first episode, of course, I had to broadcast it out, okay? I sent it to every family, every friend, especially my educator friends. Whoop, whoop. You guys know who you are, okay? Shouting out to my edu girls, okay? But yes, I really wanted to hear from each and every one of you about topics that you felt were super interesting that we discuss through this lens and through this platform. And like I said, the topic came to me. I did not have to go to it. Let me tell you. Okay, let me start off by giving y'all a little bit of story time. So after the first episode, like I said, I shared it near and far, okay? I sent this podcast to everybody that I knew and said, hey, listen, give me feedback. I want to hear from you. What did you think? What were your thoughts, right? Even though it was a really quick one, it was only 20 minutes, right? 23 minutes to be exact. I definitely wanted to hear from the people that I loved and cared about and I knew were supporting me to just get their feedback, right? A lot of these people knew exactly my intentions, my goals. They know exactly where my heart is because like I said in that first podcast, my heart has been here from day one. Okay, day one. And lo and behold, I get a phone call from my mama dearest. Now, no shade to mama dearest, okay, if she's even listening to this episode, because she did not listen to the first one. Let me tell you that, okay? What she did was she listened to my little 30-second soundbite. That's what she listened to, okay? And so she listens to my soundbite and she gives me a call. Now, let me give you a little backstory about Mama Bear. Mama Bear is a quality assurance supervisor, okay? So she is customer facing. So you know when you're in that space, you know how to speak to your audience. Yes? Y'all know where I'm going with this. I hope you do. So she calls me from that lens and says, I listened to your episode. And I said, okay, where'd you listen? I'm like, was it Apple Music? Was it Spotify? Was it Google Play? Like, tell me where, because I'm everywhere. Okay. I'm on YouTube. Where'd you listen? And she's like, oh, on Instagram. I said, mommy, I mean, you cannot listen to the whole episode on Instagram. But anyways, I digress. She didn't listen to the whole episode, but she did have a little something to say. So she heard my soundbite and she goes, well, I'm just a little bit concerned because for someone who I know speaks to equity, right? For someone that I know fights for students and them being treated with care, love, respect. For someone I know that preaches inclusivity. And I'm like, yeah, where you going with this? And she goes, I just felt that, with you making your podcast so centered around the Black student experience, it seems a little bit exclusive, don't you think? And I said, oh, really? Well, please elaborate. Please tell me more. And she went on to pretty much say that, as a listener to this topic of discussion, because my focus set is around the Black student experience and around some of the disparities that we're seeing in the education space that are centered in that way, I may not gain the viewership that I'm looking for. And I said, okay, let's be abundantly clear, right? In no way, shape, or form do I intend or desire to exclude anyone from this conversation. In my opinion, everyone needs to be a part of this conversation, right? Even if it's just to listen, to gain guidance, knowledge, perspective, like I am all for it. But what I am not going to do is water down the overall mission and cause of the podcast and its entirety, right? And we see this happen so much in educational spaces where we hear one identity being brought to the forefront and immediately it's like a whole movement. Well, what about this identity? What about that identity? What about this student experience? What about that student experience? I think that we need to be more inclusive. I think that we need to and you hear the what about me? 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 Okay? And I am not going to defend the need for this conversation. And that's what I wanted to start off by saying. And here's what I'm just not going to support and condone: the Oppression Olympics, right? For those of you who haven't heard that term, it's a term that almost perfectly defines what you or others around you may be feeling when one identity is brought to the forefront, feeling as if though we need to raise awareness that there are other identities who do experience negative outcomes in education and in society as well, and that there needs to be accountability, there needs to be support, and there needs to be rallying behind those identities as well. And so what I want to highlight here is, let's not forget the intersectionality, right? Let's not forget that one individual is not just assigned to one identity group. We have Black students in our system who have one experience that is absolutely tied to their Black identity, but we also have students who may be Black and also a part of the LGBTQ community. And their experiences are entirely different than those students who just identify as maybe Black. In addition to that, we have students who are Black, a part of the LGBTQ community, and identify as Muslim. And so that is grounds for an entirely different conversation. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that although this is the Black Academically Speaking podcast, please acknowledge that when I say Black Academically Speaking and I speak to Black student experience in education, we will be touching on multiple identities that our Black students hold. Our students are complex and they're not just a part of one identity group. And so we will be touching on how those experiences are different and how they do show up in our education system. But another thing I do want to highlight is something that my mother wanted to bring to the forefront and allow me to reflect on is how uncomfortable these conversations are. And I appreciate her for that, right? And I want to acknowledge that you're not the only one feeling uncomfortable, okay? It's not just uncomfortable for you, but it's also uncomfortable for me, right? And we can actually look to some terminology to help us understand what we are feeling in these moments. Dr. Shelley Harrell, she actually refers to this discomfort that we're feeling is actually can be referred to as racial stress. And in some texts, you may hear it being referred to as racial discourse. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. The moment that you're in a conversation, it could be in a Walmart, a Tim Hortons, the moment that race is brought up, people stop, people stare, people cringe because they're curious, oh my gosh, where is this conversation going to go? But as educators, we have to do our duty and not steer away from those conversations, but kind of steer towards them. Because if we don't, then what happens is we miss a really, really important opportunity. And again, I'm not saying this from a place of comfort myself. I know what some of you may be saying, oh, well, it's easy for you to talk about anti-Black racism because you're Black. Nope. No. My comfort is exactly where yours is at. I can almost guarantee that. The difference is that I push past that discomfort. And I push past that discomfort because I am motivated by where I know I would like the conversation to go. I am invested by the change that I want to see. And so if that grounds you in this work, knowing that there's need for change, then you will have an opportunity to push past that discomfort as well. So as we sit in a place of discomfort, let us not forget what our students are facing. How comfortable are our Black students when they hear things like the N-word in the hallways and no one doing anything about it? How comfortable are our Black students when there are microaggressions that are directed towards them by students and staff and no one is there to acknowledge their pain and suffering in those moments, right? So although we are uncomfortable, we owe it to all of our students to bring up the conversation of race and racism in our class so that we can begin to change the narrative. We can begin to provide a safe space for those students to share those experiences and be heard. So in today's episode, I'd like to equip you with a few different things. I'd like to start off the conversation by kind of discussing and going through where that discomfort comes from, right? Why do we feel so uncomfortable when we have conversations around race, and how can you push past that? And later on in the podcast, I also want to discuss why it's so important that we discuss race and racism, power, privilege, white fragility, white supremacy, all of these things in our classroom settings, and strategies that you can use to begin to kind of dibble dabble if you've never, started to have these conversations in your class, regardless of the age group of the students that you support. So let's start off by looking at one of the books that I personally have read and I really, really highly recommend, which is Promoting Racial Literacy in Schools by Dr. Howard Stevenson. And in this book, he refers to this discomfort that we feel when we have these conversations as the elephant in the room. And one of the things that he highlights in the book is ways in which people respond whenever conversations of race come up. He said that, some of the things that we will see is that people will choose avoidance, denial, or even hostility as coping strategies. And I think just based on my experience in educational settings alone, I can honestly say that I see all three forms of these coping mechanisms in my colleagues and in my administration and leadership. And so what I hope is that we can kind of look at this full circle, right? Sometimes we'll find that people may choose to avoid having these conversations with students because they feel as if though, you know what, I have great moral character, right? I have a great moral compass. But let me be clear, friends, that even though you may be great in moral character and, you may not consider yourself a racist, which I'm sure you are not, it's not a racial get out of jail free card, right? And that is something that is also referenced in the book, that if we stay silent when it comes to having these conversations with our students, it is almost equivalent to being complacent. And when we are complacent, that only sends a message to our students that this conversation is not important. And that is actually a naive worldview. Something that William Cross says in his work, right, is this perception that racial matters are not even relevant to daily social living and construction. But we know that that's not true, right? We know that if we use words like diversity as opposed to, actually calling it for what it is, right? We're not trying to promote diversity. We're trying to promote anti-Black racism. We're trying to promote anti-Islamophobia. We're trying to promote a space where our LGBTQ students feel confident, secure, and normal. No more othering, right? No more you do not belong here. That's what we're really trying to do. And so if we steer away from saying what our intentions are and continue to meet these opportunities with hesitation and caution, then our dream of having a safer school climate will continue to be a dream. So let's take a moment to kind of assess, where are you when it comes to having conversations about race? How comfortable are you when issues of anti-Black racism come up in the classroom or the staff room? How ready are you to enter those conversations? Take a moment and use kind of like a scaling system, right? One being, I'm super comfortable. I'm ready to dive in and get involved in the conversation. I'm ready to raise my hand and say how I feel about the matter and my opinions towards the matter and so forth. Or are you more a 5? A 5 being, I'm very, very, very uncomfortable and I just want to stay as quiet as a mouse. Take a moment to reflect. Maybe put that number in the chat. Put that number in the comment section below. Where do you sit? And if you're not comfortable putting a number, that's okay, right? But it's important to do that evaluation, especially before you enter those conversations with your own students. And I also want you to, in some ways, reflect on, why is it so uncomfortable? What makes it hard? What's making it difficult, right? Because I can tell you it's probably one of 3 things. And this is just me speaking straight from experience or having conversations with my edu girlies, and they know who they are. Whoop, whoop. Love it, girls. Okay, I do have my group of teacher girlies who we will have a glass of wine or maybe watch a good series on Netflix just to unpack everything that we've gone through. So love them dearly. You know who you are. But back to the 3 things that I think may be a reason why you're feeling what you're feeling. I can almost guarantee that the reason why a lot of us choose not to get into these conversations is because we feel ill-prepared, right? It's that idea of, I can't talk about anti-Black racism because I don't understand enough about it. I can't speak to the experience because I don't know enough. And that alone makes me feel nervous entering those types of conversations. So first of all, if that's how you feel, is ill-prepared, then we can fix that. Okay, that's an easy fix. I want you to think about it as your subject area. We all went through teachers college, okay? And again, maybe some of y'all listening are not necessarily educators, and that's fine. Listen away, all right? But if you did go through teachers college, you know the feeling that you had that first day of practicum placement, where they stuck you in front of that class and said, teach. And you were like, whoa, I've studied biomedical science for the last 4 years, but I have no idea how to teach. What do you mean you want me to teach? And how do I know if I'm teaching them the right thing? I feel so far removed from this system. That's how I felt anyway. I did not feel prepared to enter that classroom and get up at the front of the board and teach these little young people. Not me. I felt ill-prepared. And even after the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th practicum placement, and now I was being offered a contract, oh my gosh, the nervousness. I was like, what if I tell them the wrong thing? What if I don't know how to explain it? What if I mess up? Okay, so the same way how you conquer that, because I know you have. I know by now you're feeling super competent in your subject area. You could teach your subject area with your eyes closed, your hands tied behind your back, blindfolded, all the things, right? You don't need no guidance, right? But it took time to get there, didn't it? And it took you sitting down, even sometimes pulling all-nighters, right? I know what that looks like too. Pulling all-nighters, just teaching yourself the content the day before, right? You were just one lesson ahead of the kids. One lesson ahead of these kids. I know. It's okay. No shame in the game, all right? But you did what you needed to do to become prepared. That's the point I'm trying to make. You did what you needed to do to become prepared. And whether that meant you were up on YouTube learning about quadratic formulas and proper strategies of teaching others, right, of how to do this thing, right? Or you were up late with that textbook wide open, trying to align it with ministry expectations, right? Whether it was one extreme or the next, you did what you needed to do to become prepared. Well, I encourage you to try that same method here. If you feel ill-prepared, go study some history, some Black history, study current events. Do what's necessary to become prepared so that you can have these conversations. Another feeling that you might be encountering is feeling isolated. Like, oh my gosh, I'm a science teacher. And again, I'm speaking from experience here. I'm a science teacher. I'm meant to be teaching very regimented science curriculum. But I also want to be able to bring up these very important topics of inequities, disparities, racism, injustices that the Black community face. I want to do that. But how do I do that? I'm alone. We don't have to be alone. I can assure you that if there's not someone in your department who may be interested and intrigued of doing the same thing, there might be someone in the building who does. And maybe they're not science, maybe they're math, right? Be open to co-teaching, co-planning, debriefing with other like-minded educators. And that's what this space is all about. If again, I'm gonna plug it in there. If you haven't joined the community, join the community. We are together on Instagram. Again, become a subscriber of my newsletter, right? Let's have a conversation, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on Instagram, whether it be on Twitter. Let's talk openly and candidly about these issues and how we can better support our Black students and families. But what I do caution you on, okay, what I do caution you on is that if you are a non-Black educator and you want to do this topic justice in your classroom and you are feeling isolated and you want to know, okay, how can I do this? Am I doing something wrong? How would someone feel if I brought this up? Maybe I should gain some perspective. Do not always feel as if though you need to lean on your fellow Black educators, okay? There's a whole other wave of emotions that Black educators go through and experience when it comes to being of that identity and being the know-it-all, right? And the guiding rock in the building of all things anti-Black racism, right? They're not know-it-alls, okay? They are not your guiding rock, and they may not want to indulge in this conversation with you. And so this is an entirely separate issue that is labeled Black fatigue. There's an entire book on it. And again, any books that I'm mentioning right now or that I've mentioned previously, I plan to put all that information in the notes or in the description box below where you can find those books, you can find those resources. I will leave links to all of those things. And I will be honest in saying, guys, that if you do choose to purchase any of the books that I'm mentioning or any of the resources that I'm sending you to, they may or may not be an affiliate link, and any support absolutely helps this cause and goes directly towards supporting Black students and families. families. So I do want to kind of like drop that in there, okay? All right, the last one that you might be feeling is, what if you can't answer student questions? That's a big one, right? What if I have a student that asks me something more and I can't give it to them because I don't have the answers? Again, I'm going to remind you to think back to your subject area. Think back to those little people who are in front of you every day that can ask you the most thought-provoking questions out there that leave you stumped. Okay. I know this from personal experience. I remember teaching a grade 9 class, and I had this student, and this is when I was doing my practicum placement in Halton, and I will never forget that I was teaching space, and I'm like having a great old time up at the front of the class. I have them engaging in all things, learning about the life cycle of stars and, where all stars begin, how they die, black holes, you name it. We're getting into it. And for those of you who are like, okay, she lost me, just hang on. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay. And I have a student that comes out and starts asking me, oh, Miss Power, you seem to know so much. Can I talk to you about the quirks and the quarks and this and that? And I'm like, let's go back. I'm like, hold on. I'm that girl, but I'm not that girl. Okay. Like you might have me confused with somebody else. Okay. It was hilarious. But you know what? Perfect teachable moment, right? That I did not have all the answers that this student was looking for. And I knew in that moment, was more knowledgeable in the topic of space than I was as a 20-odd-year-old girl meant to be teaching these young minds. He knew more than me. And I'm going to be honest, friends, sometimes you're going to have that, okay? You're going to have students that are more knowledgeable in this topic, and they just might be your Black students, and they may want to highlight certain events, certain experiences, what their mothers told them, what their fathers told them, what their grandmas told them. And I implore you guys, let them shine. It is a great opportunity to have students demonstrate what they know, and it is an opportunity for other students to reflect on the lived experiences of these other identities. How can we create a classroom or a space where students are made more aware of issues and experiences of marginalized communities if we don't allow sometimes our students who may be a little bit more knowledgeable than us in this topic area to shine through? So we have to support those young minds. We have to support them when they do ask those big, bold questions and are willing to share those big, bold experiences and nurture that. So don't be afraid of not being able to answer every question. And if it's a student that may not hold that identity, right? If I'm speaking to the experiences of Indigenous communities, and I have a student who may not identify as Indigenous ask me a question simply out of wanting to understand more and wanting to know more, and I don't know where to begin in response to their question, I simply take a beat, right? I say, you know what? That's a really good question, and I think it's something that maybe we should revisit tomorrow as a class. That's okay. That's okay to do in this work. It's okay to be vulnerable and humble with our students and acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Now, for some of you, I know where you're at. You're like, listen, I teach kindergartners. I teach grade 1, grade 2 students. These are not issues that I can have with my students because, quite frankly, my kids are too young. And here's what I'm going to say to that. I'm going to push back a little bit and I'm going to say, you know what? There's no such thing as too young. There isn't. There really, really, really isn't no such thing as too young. And here's why, right? To all my kindergartner, grade 1, grade 2 teachers, when you're going through about your day and trying to teach these kids, like, motor skills, sorting skills. Ooh, Can we talk about that for a minute? We tell students that, oh, you should be able to put the triangles with all the other triangles, the blue with the blue, the yellow hat with the other yellow hats, right? Like whatever you want to say. These are numbers, these are letters, these are boys, these are girls. You get where I'm going with this? I know you know where I'm going with this, right? Same way we are trying to disrupt what students know as normal, right? Let's just go back a bit. Where does that idea of normal come from? It comes from students being able to sort and rank. They are already sorting and ranking from before they even enter your classroom. They know our colors. This is being black. This is being white. This is being tall. This is being short. This is being wide. This is being skinny. They are able to sort and rank already. And so race, unfortunately, is a part of that. Right? It is. And let's not forget that they're very impressionable minds. They're forming opinions and ideas all the time. And these ideas and opinions, where are they coming from? The shows they're watching, the conversations they're having at home, on the playground, right? And I'm not going to deny y'all, social conditioning is real, okay? It is. I know it is. And we like to think that, you know what, yeah, I don't have any biases, yeah. Like I'm woke. I know everything I need to know. I haven't been conditioned. I've reversed the conditioning. But let's be clear. Whether you like it or not, those biases are rooted deep in the fiber of your being and how you understand the world. When you think about what means go, what color comes to mind? Green. When you think about stop, what color comes to mind? Red. Okay? When you think angelic and purity, you think white. And I'm not asking you guys. Okay? Notice I'm telling you. Okay? This is an old proverb from my good old father. Okay? I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Those are the colors that come to mind. And you know where I'm going next. When you think about that bad guy in the film that's approaching the house with a hood on, looking like they're ready to rob, what color are they wearing? I can assure you it's black. And so already, whether we like it or not, these young little minds, they're being instructed by the world around them to believe that this color means good and this color means bad. This person means good for me and this person means bad. And so we have to become accountable to our title. Again, I'm going to bring it all the way back to Teachers College for you. I know what y'all are going to say. She bringing it back. Yes, I'm bringing it back. Okay. In Teachers College, I remember when they told me that I was in loco parentis. Y'all remember that word? In loco parentis. That meant that I was acting in place of the parent. All of a sudden, I'm exposed to the same liabilities for this child's well-being as their parents. And we know we correct kids. We know we do. You hear a grade 3 student saying a bad word. What is your first reflex? Stop them. Tell them that's wrong. Don't say that. That's a bad word. Right? In loco parentis. When you think about that child that you saw approach the other one in the back of your class, because they were mad because, oh, you took the toy I wanted to play with and they hit one another. No. No hitting, no causing harm. In loco parentis, right? But let's think about it. If you are there in place of the parent, And one of your jobs as an educator is to nurture this child and protect their emotional and physical well-being, then we also need to consider how they're impacting others, both physically and emotionally. And part of that comes with disrupting any type of prejudice that they may have towards others. So if we are not having these conversations because of discomfort, then we're doing every single one of our students a disservice. And I know what some of y'all are thinking. Monique, I hear you. Monique, I understand that this is important. But at the end of the day, that is not my curriculum. So let me speak to those people in the back for a minute. It may not be part of your curriculum. You're right. But I can guarantee you, if I, as a science educator, high school science educator at that, can make it my curriculum, you can too. Okay? So for the last little bit of this podcast, I want to hit you with some strategies. Okay? What are ways that you can approach conversations about race with your students? So the first thing I'm going to say right out the gate is the same way that I come to you from a humble place, from a vulnerable place, do the same with your students. Come to them honestly, come to them vulnerably, have a disclaimer. Tell them, guys, we're about to have this conversation and I'm going to be honest, it's not going to feel great. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And I don't know everything about this topic, but I do feel the need to have it. I do feel the need to have this conversation with you guys and to promote your awareness around these issues. Okay? So if you are in front of the little guys, the little ones, you can do that through storytelling. Notice how I started today's podcast. I started off today's podcast with a beautiful story of my mama bear, right? And how that got me thinking about the discomfort that all of us face when having this conversation, right? So we could do it through storytelling. That's an amazing avenue to begin to discuss race and racism, right? You could choose a story that talks to it more directly. And like, oh, this boy went through this experience and this is what it's called. It's called racism, right? You could do it in a very, very, very direct way. Or you can turn to a story that speaks to it more indirectly. And I almost prefer the latter because that allows me to engage in a deeper conversation with my students. And it almost allows them to go through a little bit of like self-exploration. How much do they understand behind what's happening and why, the reasons why this family maybe went through this experience, this community went through this experience, right? That gets you to have a more robust conversation. So I think you have to kind of use your own judgment on what type of story is best suited for the group of learners in front of you. For me, as a science teacher, I love doing it through case studies, right? When we look at, the Nova Scotia experiences of environmental racism, right? We watch documentaries like There's Something in the Water. That is something that absolutely is very on brand and very on topic for my curriculum and my expectations and meeting those expectations, right? We're talking about systemic issues. We're talking about social impacts. We're talking about environmental impacts. We're talking about economic impacts, but from the lens of this community, the Black community in Nova Scotia and the experiences they had, as well as the Indigenous community, right? The Mi'kmaq community, right? So I can do that through a case study and open the floor that way. So that is one of the best ways, in my opinion, to begin to have these types of conversations. But I do implore you, right? Ensure that when you're having these conversations, your environment is welcoming, right? You want to create a space where students can not only again, go through that self-exploration and self-discovery of how much do I know, but also share their own experiences. Create a platform where students can say, hey, has something like this ever happened to you? Right? And maybe they don't want to verbalize that. Maybe they don't want to raise their hand and share in front of everyone. But maybe the next step is to allow them to do it on a more personal level through a letter to self, or a letter to the main character, or a letter to the government, right? And have them be a little bit more personal. Share your own experiences with them. Make it relatable. But I encourage you, friends, do not wait until the next racially charged event in the world to start to have these conversations with your students. Because we all know that every board was extremely reactive to the murder of George Floyd. And we started to see the dismantling anti-Black racism strategies popping up out of the woodworks after the brutal killing of George Floyd. And the continued awareness, Black souls that lost their lives, like Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Eric Gardner, don't wait for the next one. Don't wait for the next war. Don't wait for the next racially charged event to happen in our society for you to take action in your class. Create a space where these conversations are the normal. Create a space where you can promote the well-being of all of your students while discussing issues that are real and relevant and that they have personal ties to outside of your classroom. But at the same time, you can do this through emotional check-ins, ensuring that students are aware of their emotions. Again, think of what I asked you earlier today. I asked you, where do you sit on the scale from 1 to 5? How comfortable are you with having these conversations? And the more uncomfortable you are, and you can identify you are, that is you being emotionally aware. So have kids do the same. You can do this through happy faces to sad faces and everything in between. You could use colors and ask them to identify a color of how they feel before the conversation, during the conversation, after the conversation, and provide an opportunity for them to unpack those emotions. Right? But we want to reduce racial prejudice. We want to reduce status quo and what our students are learning to be or consider as normal. Right? And we could do this almost every day in our class. And I know for some, especially for my math people, you're thinking, I can't do this every day. I got a math curriculum to teach. I got addition and multiplication to teach. I got quadratic equations and parabolas to teach. Guys, don't worry. I got you. Okay? Inclusive practices are real. Culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy is real. And I know I'm hitting you with words that you probably do not want to hear right now. Okay? Those words are like death right now. And it's like, Monique, do not say those words because I don't even know what they mean. Again, that's the intent behind the podcast. Okay? We're going to unpack those words. We're going to unpack what it means to do culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy in every subject area. And we're going to do it with a lens of our BIPOC students, right? But we have to go about changing what the normal is. And we can do that in our own classroom setting by even creating our own classroom norms. What will we tolerate? What will we allow? And what will we absolutely have a no-nonsense policy for? When students say things like, that's so gay, how willing are you to correct that? When students say the R word, how willing are you to correct that? When students call each other stupid, how willing are you to correct that? So we have to have the same energy around racial slurs, right? And any comment that comes across as racially prejudiced. We have to set a clear precedence on what is acceptable and what is not. We are in loco parentis, and it's part of our job. It's part of our duty and part of our moral obligation. So I will leave you with that, friends. I'm hoping that this conversation was just as insightful and as valuable as I originally intended for it to be. And before you go, I'm going to remind you to please, please, please continue to support. Right? It takes a lot for me to put these episodes together for you, and to create this community and space and continue to be consistent in my posting. So please show me your support by leaving me a 5-star review. And even if it's not a 5-star and you have some other feedback to give, feel no hesitation around providing that feedback. You could contact me and join the movement on BL Speaking everywhere. BL Speaking on Twitter, or what's now known as X, Instagram, you name it. I'm all over the social media. You can also send me an email at blspeaking@gmail.com. And I really look forward to continuing our movements and pushing the narrative forward. Until then, I wish you all very